as you are starting out, as you're taking action, just realize you will fail along the way. In fact, most of the time you will fail. However, you'll find those little golden nuggets along the way, and people will see you struggling, and they'll see you fighting to, get to your destination, like you said, that journey, and they'll jump in and they'll help you.
Pause. Take a break. Reflect on life. Your moment of greatness starts now.
In this episode, we are going on a flight towards peak performance and success with our guest, who is a husband, father, entrepreneur, business owner, fighter pilot, and author of a book series entitled Single Seat Wisdom. Welcome to the show, Dominic. How are you doing?
Thanks, Toby. Yeah, I'm happy to be here talking to you from all the way around the world.
Yeah, you're talking all the way from Arizona, I believe, right?
Yeah, Arizona.
And I'm here. Arizona. Wow, that's so awesome. Thanks to technology and thanks to yeah, everything that makes this possible. Basically, I'm so excited
Yeah.
to be sitting here with you virtually to talk about everything you've experienced and how to even become peak performers basically in life. Yeah.
Yeah, let's
But
do it.
before we dive into all of that goodies, I'd love us to just learn from your life journey so far and from your story. What excites me most is you are or you were like a fighter pilot. You are a fighter pilot, and
Yeah.
I'd love you to talk to us about your experience as a fighter pilot. What does it feel like to be a fighter pilot? How do you become one, and what is it like to be that?
Yeah, so honestly, I've been I've been flying airplanes now for over 20 years, and a lot of times I think, just like anybody, when you are um in your job or your career field or whatever you're doing for a long enough time, you kind of forget. You forget about what you're doing, and you forget about the bigger picture. And it's not until, I mean, this happened to me the other day. I came back from a flight, and I brought the student back because he was going through some upgrade training. And as I was bringing the aircraft into land, there were about 20 vehicles parked off of the approach end of the runway, and they were taking pictures and waving, and they were so excited to see fighter jets coming back to land at the airfield. And it just kind of reminded me that, there's a lot of yeah, it's a constant reminder that there are, the younger generation that's up and coming, that aspires to do, bigger and better and, great things. And I'm not saying that everybody's cut out to be a fighter pilot, but whether or not you want to be a professional athlete, or you want to run a business, or you want to do something with your life other than just being a couch potato and playing video games, or just kind of wasting away. um,
Mm,
I think that's kind of the reminder that I got. And so, as a fighter pilot, to get to your question, what does it feel like? I don't feel like I'm supposed to be doing this still. I feel super lucky, and my path wasn't the traditional path to get to where I am now. But I feel very grateful that I'm here, and get to do this as a profession and as a job. And I just
mm.
love it.
Oh, that's awesome. When you said your path is not the traditional path to get there, what do you mean by
Yeah. So
that?
I mean, I grew up in the country, and I went through all different types of school, whether that was private school, public school, home school, private tutoring. I went through, I didn't go through a major university initially. I did transfer into a major university. Nobody in my family was pilots. I have very few
Mm,
military family members. I really didn't know what I was doing, Toby. I didn't have any guides or mentors showing me the way. Um, but as I grew up, there were certain things that happened in my life where I found myself, playing baseball in junior college, and also taking flight lessons and going, taking my college classes. And I found that, the aviation world really hooked me and pulled me in. And so I became a civilian instructor pilot to start out. And then, just through different steps and meeting different people and talking to people, I applied to go through officer training school, which is probably this it's one of the ways to get in to be a pilot in the military. But it's the least amount of people get accepted, because they take the most people from the service academies, the Air Force Academy, or um, the different service academies in the United States, as well as ROTC programs through major universities. So that was kind of a shot in the dark, but it worked. And so then I went through officer training school, and then I went through Air Force flight training school. And, after a few more steps, I find myself in a fighter jet. And most of the guys that I'm around did not have that type of
Mm,
progression. They got accepted to a major university or a service academy, and then they got their
mm.
pilot slot, and then they were at pilot training. And mine was a multi-year explorative journey with no coaches and mentors initially, and just me kind of slugging it out, against the world to clamber my way into a fighter cockpit.
Yeah, wow, boy, you became successful in it, right? I mean, from what you just said right now, it doesn't determine, or it doesn't matter what kind of path we go through in life. As long as we get to our destination, then yes, we become successful.
Yeah, and I think that the lesson behind that, Toby, because a lot of people ask is, well, what would you say when you were starting out? Because a lot of people go, well, before I start, I need a mentor, and I would say false. I didn't start out looking for a mentor. I started out. I took that first step. I went to one of the local flight schools, and I said, what do I even do if I want to fly airplanes? How does that even work? Like, how do I apply? How much
Mm,
does it cost? And as you start out, you start taking steps, those mentors show up in your life as you are progressing. So while I was in my third and fourth year of my undergraduate studies to get my bachelor's degree, I started meeting fighter pilots because I started taking aviation classes, and the professors were retired fighter pilots in certain classes. So then I could pick their ear, and they kind of, I didn't go, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" and act all awkward, but I did pick their ear and ask
mm,
them a bunch of questions about, what is it like, and how do I do that, and what's the next step, and where do I go? And so I think that's the biggest
mm.
lesson learned, is that, as you are starting out, as you're taking action, just realize you will fail along the way. In fact, most of the time you will fail. However, you'll find those little golden nuggets along the way, and people will see you struggling, and they'll see you fighting to, get to your destination, like you said, that journey, and they'll jump in and they'll help you.
But it all starts with you, basically. It starts with you taking that small step, that big step of
Yep.
faith towards where you want to get to in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say, like if you reflect back, from the beginning of your journey, even up to this moment, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from being a fighter pilot and even a father right now and a business owner and all of that mixed
Yeah,
together?
so I'm a big mindset kind of guy, because I've had so many issues with my own mind. I've gotten in my own way so many times, and this is an oversimplification of something that can help other people, or at least kind of hone in on what you're supposed to do. But fighter pilots, in our second volume of Single Seat Wisdom, there's a fighter pilot who's also an astronaut, and his chapter talks about plan, execute, debrief. So in the fighter pilot world, we put our plan together, and then we go out and we execute that plan as a team, and then we debrief. We bring out those lessons learned. A lot of them are painful, especially if the mission was a failure. So if you're planning,
Mm,
executing, debriefing, like I said, maybe a little bit of an oversimplification, but where my life really turned around was, I was the type of person that was a an action taker, right? So I just did a lot of things, and that worked for many years until I
mm.
got married, and then had a kid, and then started a business, and started another business, and I was just taking so much action throughout the day that by the end of the day, and definitely by the end of the week, I was just completely burnt out. And so my focus was on a lot of good things, right? A lot of good ideas, a lot of good things, and some of them were succeeding. In fact, most of them were. However, it was for the wrong reason. And so what I started doing was going to bed a little bit earlier than I normally did, right? So I wouldn't watch an extra show with my wife. We would talk, and then we would go to bed, and I would wake up more rested. And in the morning, a lot of people would say they're not morning people. I would say that I was not a morning person. However, I started waking up early, out of necessity to get up before my children did. And for many years, I got up at 4 a.m. so that I could get my business stuff done before my kids woke up and then before I had to go into work. And that's how I kind of ran my
Mm,
businesses, and that required me to go to bed early. But before I started the day, if I started a day without some focus, and I call it, you can call it 5 minutes for freedom, or you can just call it 5 minutes of silence, but starting your day with that sacred time that is, whether that's prayer or silence or meditation or whatever, it helps you just kind of like center your day and figure out what your intention is that day. Because you're going to run into
mm,
so many people that think the sky is falling throughout your day, and you're going to run into all these problems. And if you're a person that wakes up and that just wants a perfect day, well, you've started your day off on the wrong foot, because if something goes wrong, it's going to topple you. It's going to topple your mindset. So again, a
mm,
little bit of an oversimplification, but in the morning, spending that time, and if you're an action taker, if you're somebody that wants to start doing things, if you try to go for 15 minutes and sit still for 15 minutes, it might be too
mm,
long. But 5 minutes, just spend 5 minutes and
mm,
say, at the end of the day, if I could say I did one thing and that one thing is X, what would that be? And you would say, okay, today was a success. And that may be, I need to do less today and spend more time on these relationships or whatever. So I think that was, again, it's an
mm,
oversimplification. It doesn't work for everybody, but for me, what really helped was going to bed earlier, because I could kind of control that, and then I woke up more rested. And then the big thing was in the morning was focusing on, hey, what do I need to do today? And
mm.
more specifically, what's the 99 things that I don't need to do?
Mm. Oh, that's good. I really like that. And I would love to go back to, this planning, executing, and the briefing that you do as fighter pilots. So if you want to use that for our own lives, basically, would it be early in the morning? We have to wake up when we want to wake up, like early in the morning, basically, and then we plan our day. Then during the day we execute. Then at night, then we debrief. Or how
Yeah,
do
so
you
I
go
mean,
about that?
waking up early in the morning may not work for somebody that works night shifts, right? So um, whenever you
Mm,
start your day, instead of instead of grabbing your cellular phone or turning on the TV and watching all of the bad news that the world is going to pump your way, don't look at social media, don't look at any of that
mm,
stuff. Set your phone aside and just, maybe grab your tea or cup of coffee or water, whatever, grab your favorite drink and just sit there and think about that day, right? And that just really kind of, it slows you down initially, but then I find that the acceleration throughout the day, it really helps. And then you start your day centered, and you don't start your day in this. I mean, Toby, for so many years, I would get up and I had my morning planned to where I would get up and I knew how much time it took me to brush my teeth and to do all these little things so that I could get out the door, drive to work, and be to work, I mean, a minute early. Right. And so as soon as I woke up, I was just rushing. My whole day was this rushing
mm,
feeling to it. And, it really gets, if you're an anxious person, that's a terrible thing to do. So, I mean, even more of a reason to, just kind of slow down in the morning and go, hey, what is my plan for today? And then, like you were saying, as you are then executing your day, whether that's in business or school or whatever, you need to think back to, okay, what is my plan? And then throughout the day, that doesn't mean that you can't be debriefing yourself on what happened, especially if you made a mistake or something went wrong. You need to go, that sucks, or hey, I just failed a test, or I just lost a high paying client, and to look at those lessons and then to readjust your plan and then start executing again. Because I think a lot of people miss the debrief portion of their life, and then they end up just basically doing the same thing over and over and over. And we are habitual creatures, and we find ourselves in these hamster wheels doing the same thing and nothing changes.
yeah, that's very true. That's very true. That's why I believe debriefing is very, very important, and taking, whatever we learn from that into the plan for the next
Yes.
iteration, basically, or for the next day or so. Yeah. But from your experience, like how do you deal with failure? I know this failure, we can prevent failure in some ways, like from how you explained, planning, executing, and debriefing. But life just comes with, we're making mistakes, learning from these mistakes, comes with failure, and we, growing or learning from these failures. But from your own experience so far, what's the best way to take failure and turn it into lessons, or to deal with it in general?
That's a good question because I failed. I would say I was a very poor at failing, and that was because of a an
Mm,
overprotective ego and not enough humility to know that um, failing is part of life, and that's part of being a human. Being we are imperfect beings, and we will fail throughout life. I mean, I was reading something yesterday, um, and most people know who Michael Jordan is around the world, but his 3-point shooting average, I
mm,
think, and don't quote me on this, was maybe 36%, right? And so one of the greatest basketball players of all time ever to walk the face of earth would miss would miss his shots, right, well over 50% of the time. So this is one of the best basketball players to
mm,
ever live who fails at 3-point shots over 50% of the time, but on paper is one of the most phenomenal players, that the NBA has ever known. So you look at something like that, and I think
mm,
the lesson behind failure is just know that that will happen. And as the failure most of the time, if you sit back and as you're planning, executing, and specifically you're debriefing. So I think it was Tony Robbins that said something along the lines of, um, I'm kind of drawing a blank, but he said that failure is an event, it's not a person. So the event was a failure, but you as a person are not. So I think that's very important to see. And I think Nelson Mandela said something along the lines too. He has like I have failing and winning, or I have winning and learning experiences, or something along those lines, where he either wins or he learns, and those learning experiences are the failures.
mm,
And so I think the big thing is to just know that you will fail, as you are. The shortest line from A to B is a straight line, right? But you're going to have, as humans, we're going to kind of zigzag our way to that blurry finish line that we've kind of tried to visualize, but we can't really see perfectly. And you're going to zig and zag, and you're going to fail. You may be on the wrong track. You may have to start over. But instead of beating yourself up and never trying again, ask yourself what you learned from those events. Write it down. Talk to those people that have shown themselves in your life, that have become guides and mentors, and go, dude, I'm feeling really down on myself. I started this thing, I failed. Where do I go from here? And have your day or
mm.
two of pity party, but then pick yourself back up again and try again, and just realize that the failure is it. Maybe it was you that failed, maybe it was your plan, maybe it was your team, who knows, but learn from that, make it stronger, and start over again.
Hey there, podcast enthusiasts. Are you ready to add a little sparkle to your day? If you're loving the insightful conversations and captivating stories on Mirror Talk Podcast, here's a friendly nudge to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on the empowering messages and thought provoking discussions we bring to your ears. But wait, there's more. We're all about spreading positivity and inspiration, and you can be a part of it too. How? By sharing the love with your friends and family. Share this episode with your loved ones, and let's create a ripple effect of empowerment and growth together. And hey, if you've been enjoying what you hear, why not take a moment to leave us a glowing 5-star review? Your feedback fuels our passion to keep delivering content that resonates with you. So hit that subscribe button, share the love, and leave us a review. Let's keep the conversation going and spread the Mirror Talk magic far and wide. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, your support means the world to us.
Yes, yes. Pick yourself back up again, learn from the
Yeah.
experience, and yes. go for it again. Yes, go for it again with with a much more refined perspective or a plan. Yeah, and I'm happy you made mention of plan. Sometimes we make errors, while planning, and that leads to the failure at the end of the day. So I'm just curious to know, if there are like some, fighter pilots planning techniques that we could make use of in our own life, also in our business, also, and maybe if we can also use this to refine or define our
Yeah,
purpose
so
in
I
life
mean,
too.
there are so many different acronyms and books and stuff about putting a plan together. Um, I think
Mm,
for it's kind of personality dependent because and Toby, you've met these people that um, have these great ideas, but they have a very difficult time starting. And so, if you're opposite the pendulum from me, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. So I'm more of a I need to get going. So I plan enough to get going. That's just my personality. There are issues with that
mm,
because if you plan enough to get going, there are going to be things that needed to be better within the plan. But I'm constantly, as I'm executing, I'm constantly debriefing and I'm tweaking my plan again. And I'm okay. And I know my personality, and I'm okay to have those little failures that I can fix along the way. The other side of the pendulum
mm,
is, and this is, it's maybe a platitude, but or overused a little bit, but it's the analysis paralysis, right? So if you find that yourself, if you're a person that is is a planner and you want the perfect plan, that's okay to be that way, I think. I'm not like that. However, you either need to have somebody that holds you accountable that is pushing your plan into action, or if you're one of those types of people,
mm,
set a deadline. So, okay, hey, 3 months from now, I am going to start executing my plan, and then have somebody hold you accountable to that. Tell other people about it and start, because that starting process, when you take that first step, you are going to find out that your plan is not perfect. You're going to make mistakes, and that doesn't mean that everything's a failure. You just go
mm,
tweak your plan again. So, debrief yourself, tweak your plan, and start the
mm,
next day. When I hired, I did things backwards because I had never owned a business before. So my first business, I hired I hired fast and fired slow, which is the opposite way you need to do things.
oh,
You hire slow
yeah.
and fire fast. Um, and there are people that
Mm,
are good people that will not be good for your team. And it's not a personal thing, it's just a business thing. Now, granted, there are toxic people that you may need to actually fire. However, I fired over 80% of the people that I initially hired because I didn't know what I didn't know. And they just didn't fit that plan. And it wasn't a it as I was letting them go off the team, it wasn't a you're a bad person, you're a terrible X, Y, and Z. It was a conversation that I had that said, "Hey, I started this business to do this exact thing." And for
mm,
accountants, for instance, there's just like doctors, you wouldn't go to a heart doctor to have him fix your foot, right? So just like an accountant, I hired the
mm,
wrong accountant for what I wanted to do within my multifamily like apartment real
mm,
estate business. So I think that's
yeah.
that's the important thing, as you're starting out, to kind of get back to your question, is just realize that if you're on one side of the pendulum and you're the analysis paralysis type of person, you need to set a date and time that you're going to start executing. If you're like me, where I'm a plan enough to get going, I have people around me that are the doomsday thinkers that poke holes in my plan. And that way, my wife's wonderful at this,
Mm,
and she's not a doomsday thinker, but she'll actually just pause, and hey, I'm about to do this, babe. And she'll go, did you think of this, this, and this? And I'm like, nope. Thanks for letting me know. I'm going to go tweak my plan. So it's just kind of
mm,
knowing what kind of person
yeah.
you are or where you are on that spectrum, and then either having people around you that can help you, or holding yourself accountable to get going, because that's where you're going to start to learn.
Yes, we need to be accountable to ourselves and to people, to trustworthy people, trustable people out there that could tell us, hey,
Yeah.
Dominic, what's up? What's up with the plan, and how far are you with what you intended to, what you plans to do or intended to do? Yeah, yeah. I mean, and also I love the fact that you brought in your wife right now, because we need people like her in our lives too that could tell us that could actually sit back, even when we are super excited about our plans and they are also very happy for us, that could also actually reflect and take that time to look back at the plan and say, oh, what about this perspective? Have you considered this? Have you looked at that? Because sometimes we could just be, um, you know, one-sided basically, or looking at it from just one perspective, but we need all possible perspectives to a plan to make it a
Yeah,
success
it's
in,
so
in a
true.
way.
You need to
Yeah.
have those, what do they say? The
Yeah.
five people that are closest to you are going to influence you the most. So you have to, that's something you have to think about, that
Mm.
and family members, as tough as it may be, there may be a family member that you're really close with that's really holding you back for whatever reason. Um and
Mm.
and I, you see it too. It may be your spouse that is just so unwilling to go down the path. And that's something that you'll have to, work through and figure out if what you want to do
Mm.
matches up with your relationships and the people around you. If yeah, and those are the little hurdles you have to cross.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. Yeah, Dominic, I would love us to talk about your book or your book series, which is entitled Single Seats Wisdom. So, can you tell us about this book series? What
So
inspired you to write it
it
or
actually
write them?
started, this whole idea, the overarching business is called single seat mindset, because we are, as fighter pilots, there are very few two-seat jets nowadays. So most of the time, it is only one person in the jet. So you have to have there's certain training and stuff that goes into developing a mindset that can overcome hurdles on a mission and that kind of stuff, and be able to take care of your jet, work as a team with the other fighter jets that you're employing with. And that single seat mindset, there's a lot of training that goes on that gets to you to where you're supposed to be. And Toby, I would say the vast majority, over 99% of the fighter pilots in the world, none of them were born to be fighter pilots. It's a learned experience. And I think that's an important thing to know, um, even as a listener, is that it's learned. Just like a major league baseball player doesn't step into the batter's box and just swing at 100 mile an hour fastball and hit it, right? It's planning, it's training that gets them to that point. So I when COVID hit the world and everybody was locked down, we had a class that was really struggling. So I started writing them, one, like 2 to 3 minute little messages once a week, that digitally, right? So I would just send them these emails, and then I started doing that for other classes that were coming through, these young aspiring fighter pilot students, and I was started to get feedback, and then I automated it into a website so that they could sign up on their own and either sign up for it if they wanted it or not. And then that grew into conversations that I had with other fighter pilots, that I would ask them, hey, you have a lot of good stories and you're about to retire. You're going to retire and go fly for the airlines or start your own business, or just retire and do whatever you're going to do. Do you want to put your story on paper? And so
Mm.
it was a little bit of a hobby when I started it out, but I had started other businesses. So I quickly shifted focus and made single seat mindset a business. Um, and to just make sure that I had the right intentions of the business, up front, I decided to give all of the money to a children's cancer nonprofit. So not only were we going to give back to aspiring fighter pilots or peak performers, or those that want to just know about what fighter pilots do through storytelling, we were going to give all the money to a children's cancer nonprofit.
Mm.
And so that's been an incredible journey. It's kept our vision aligned, in the right direction. And
Mm.
every fighter pilot author that writes in these books also contributes to this, children's cancer nonprofit, the Anna Schindler Foundation. It's children that get cancer and they need a place to stay, and the families need money, and so we contribute to that. But then we also, wrote a book, Single Seat Wisdom, and we made it volume one, and it's basically 20 individual chapters written by a different fighter pilot with a different message, with their fighter pilot wisdom at the end. And the cool thing about these books is that you can sit down and read one chapter in about 10 minutes, and then never touch that book for the next year and pick it up again and just start on a different
Mm.
chapter, and
Yeah.
it's not going to consume your life. So even if you
Mm.
don't like reading books, or if you have a short attention span, or you just want something to kind of motivate you or inspire you throughout your day, this type of book is that's what we wrote it
Mm.
for. Is they're short, punchy, anecdotal stories about life lessons through the lens of a fighter pilot, but it's applied to whether that's business, entrepreneurship, philosophy, spirituality, the life of a fighter pilot. So we have all of those, and it then became this beast that kind of grew into other people wanting to contribute. So we wrote Single Seat Wisdom Volume 2. So that one's published.
Mm.
And then begrudgingly, another fighter pilot that I had met, a couple of them pushed me into writing Volume 3. So we are in the process, as of this recording, of onboarding the next authors and writing and publishing and designing and doing all that stuff for Volume 3.
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm so happy for what you do for the children, like helping the needy ones out there. That's awesome. That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. But if you look at all the stories that you've had the opportunity of listening to so far from all these fighters and from all the wisdom that you've accumulated in the book, which one stands out the most to you of all
Well,
of
I would
them?
say for specifically your listeners that want to be peak performers and do something in their life, and I'm very biased
Mm.
because I've compiled these stories. I haven't written all of them. I only wrote one of the chapters, so just don't read my chapter. Read the others.
Mm.
Um, but the
Yeah.
story that stands out is kind of the one that we've been talking about. Granted, again, I'm biased. I think they're all great for where you are in your journey. Right, there may be something that you read from one of the stories that you wouldn't have gotten a year ago, but it really hits home today, type of thing. But the plan, execute, debrief
Mm.
chapter in Single Seat Wisdom Volume 2,
Mm.
written by Box Johnson, the astronaut fighter pilot. That one is one that it's not overly simplistic. However, it does bring up some very
Mm.
it brings up a very easy framework to help those or to guide those that want to go somewhere, right? And then you'll find that if you are failing over and over and over again, then maybe you're messing up one of those steps, right? So maybe your plan isn't good enough,
Mm.
or maybe you already executed your plan and then you failed, but you didn't effectively debrief and you didn't find out the why behind you failed. And then you're unable to put your plan together. So I think that chapter specifically for today is one that I think is very impactful, and the debrief portion of it is important too. And if you're wondering, I say this word debrief a lot. If you're wondering what that means, there's a chapter written by
Mm.
a Top Gun weapons officer, instructor pilot in Volume 1, and he wrote a chapter on how fighter pilots debrief. So he actually wrote a weapons school level paper, a
Mm.
like graduate to doctorate level paper on how to debrief and what that looks like. And so that's in that chapter. If you want to get a little
Mm.
bit more in the weeds of what that looks like.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I'm going to place the link to your website in the show notes of this episode. So anyone who wants to get the book, you just click on your the link to the website, copy the link, and find information about the book. Buy the book. Volume 1, Volume 2 are available on Amazon or other platforms, and you could just buy the book, read it, and watch out for the planning, executing, and the previous chapter, and then learn from that chapter,
Yes.
especially. Yeah. So for someone out there who's asking, okay, Dominic, please, I want to have this single seat mindset. Like, what does that mean, and how can I
Yeah.
develop this
So
mindset in my life?
I kind of alluded to it earlier. It's
Mm.
it's something that it's learned, right? So you're going to, if you are goal oriented, if you're a goal oriented individual, you're going to want to take action and get going, and you're going to be frustrated with anything that kind of slows you down, long-winded processes, programs, unnecessary protocol, that kind of stuff will frustrate you if there's no deliverable outcome. So as a single seat fighter pilot,
Mm.
I know that as our training progresses, we are trained to make split decisions at over 800 miles an hour, and those decision making skills can be very leverageable into high performance professions, whether that's professional sports, aviation, a doctor,
mm,
business owner, that kind of thing. So I think that the single seat mindset can be confused with I'm going to do everything myself. And that could not be further from the truth. So, as a single seat fighter pilot, we are trained
mm,
um, in a way, kind of like business owners learn through failure. But as a business owner, if you are the owner, you have to make tough decisions. So you're kind of a single seat mindset person where you're running the show and you're going to make failures and you're gonna win, lose, that kind of thing. But there's some resilience that goes along with that. So if you find that
mm,
you're in that seat and you're the one that's making decisions and doing that, fighter pilots have training that basically allows us to do short, impactful steps, and that we can avoid those failures through planning, executing, and debriefing through these concepts and these academic things that we put into action every day and practice every day to avoid those failures. But I would say
mm,
if someone's like, "Oh, you're a single seat fighter pilot, you're arrogant and cocky," and I'm like, "Okay, cool. That can happen." Unfortunately, I have been that way in my career as a younger fighter pilot. I would hope that a lot of that has
mm,
moved on and I'm a little bit more humble and approachable and hopefully credible. However, I think the important thing to know as the single seat mindset, it just means that you have a resilient mindset that's trained and you're ready. However, we employ as a team. And fighter pilots, we very, very rarely do anything with just one aircraft. We have at least two, if not four or eight, or very large packages of aircraft that go out and employ together. So if you're not taking care of what you need to take care of in your own single seat cockpit, that really can affect the team as a whole.
mm. Yeah, I believe that it's like a group work, but you doing your own
Yes.
part to the best of your capacity to ensure
Yes.
that the whole group succeeds. Yeah. Yeah, I believe this also helps us to become peak performers, right? Because we're in that single seat and we have all the
Yeah.
buttons, I assume, and, like, and everything to operate on, and we have to be coordinated and be organized and ensure that we are
Yeah,
able to carry out
exactly.
the
And you
mission
can
properly.
be an
Yeah.
employee or you can be someone that is not the boss. In fact, I am that person within my job that I have now as a fighter pilot. I'm not the squadron commander. So, but in the capacity that I'm in, the shop and the job that I do work on right now, I want to make sure that I'm doing that to the best of my ability. And if I
Mm.
don't, if I fail, then I admit it. I get better. I debrief and I do it better the next time.
Yes, I believe that. Wow. Dominic, I've learned so much from you from this conversation already. But before I let you go, I would love to learn something from you. I know I've learned a lot already from you, but if you could just reflect back at your journey so far, what would you say uh, has been the biggest obstacle? The biggest obstacle that you've experienced so far, and what helped you the most on your
So
journey?
I was uh, like I had said before, is I'm an action taker, so I do a lot, and I think where, like I said, where things really shifted is when I spent that time early in the morning to visualize, but then also to have my intention set at the beginning of the day. Where am I going? Where am I going with my day? And that's where things really started to change because I found myself doing so
Mm,
much and just taking all these actions. And people from the outside would say, "Hey, you look successful." But inside, I just achieved the next level, but I hadn't made it to the end. So I was missing the entire journey. I was missing all the fun that happens during the journey. And I was just achieving all of these things. I was a high achiever, but I hadn't defined success. And more importantly, beyond success, I didn't ask myself, what is the significance of that? So, writing these books, it was it was successful because they worked. The significance behind that is that we get to give back to a children's cancer nonprofit. We get to give back from stories. I my kids now see that dad writes books and other fighter pilots that write books, so there's some significance beyond that. So I think if you are a big action taker and you're always doing stuff, you need to sit back and maybe ask yourself, what can you stop doing so that you can put more effort towards
mm,
the programs or whatever you're doing in your life that has a bigger significance um, for that adds up to success. So just avoid that achievement hamster wheel where you're just going round and round and round and round and just go, is this a successful thing? And
mm,
then if it is, what significance does that have in the bigger scheme of things.
Scheme of things, yes. And is it the same thing you tell someone out there who wants to become a peak performer, or are there like some additional things you love to tell people out there who are listening and so eager to become
Something that I would
peak
say to them
performers?
is they could start out at singleseatmindset.com. That's our main platform. But on
Mm,
that platform, we have what's
yeah,
called the Insider Circle.
yeah.
We're constantly updating and kind of refining it. But on there, we have what's called the Competent Wingman, and it's essentially all of the years
Mm,
of messages that we've now distilled down into very, very short messages once a week, and it's a completely free program that just goes right to your email inbox. And it's if you read stuff that was written by me, it's going to be a lot of lessons on failure. So I think that's kind of the big thing is, what can I do, in 2 minutes a week? Is there something that a little bite that I could read and go, oh yeah, that I need to be doing that this week, and kind of help you refine your plan, so that week you're executing at a higher level. And then at the end of the week, when you debrief your week, you go, okay, sweet. So next week I'm going to do this, right? And it helps you with those habits.
yeah, yeah. Yes. Wow. Thank you so much for that. Thanks so much for this wonderful conversation. I'm sure there are people out there who would still love to get across to you, maybe get the book and still wants to ask you more questions. What is the
Yep.
best
So
way to connect and work with you?
singleseatmindset.com, we've got all of our social media on there, all the
Mm.
books, all of the extra links and everything to everything that we're doing is right there on that base page. That's the easiest way to get a hold of us. And I'd love to hear from anybody that has any other questions, even if they think that they're dumb questions that, I get asked 100 times as a fighter pilot.
Yeah, awesome. So the link one more time is going to be in the show notes of this episode. I encourage everyone to click on the link, copy the link, get the book, and ask Dominic any question. He said any question
Yeah.
is welcome. So basically, feel free. Thank you so much, Dominic. I really appreciate this. It has been so awesome speaking with you and learning so much about the fighter pilot mindset, the single seat mindset, and wisdom, and everything that helps us to become even better beings and successful beings
Thank you,
and
Toby.
peak performers. Thank you so much. Wow, you made it to the very end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm grateful for your time, your love, and your contributions. Subscribe, like, review, and share this podcast. God bless you. Bye. Bye.